Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. My name is Josh. I'm joined, as always, by Sam. We got plenty to get to from maybe not such an eventful Grand Prix at Spa, at least not as eventful as we'd like to see, especially with all of the rain and everything that was a factor there. First off, though, Sam, how are you doing, and how was your weekend watching the race?
It was great. Yeah, I mean, Spa is one of my favorite tracks to look forward to every year. This certainly was not the Spa weekend that we've looked forward to a lot of years, as you alluded to, but still had a nice time, still some exciting moments and some exciting action to talk about.
Yeah, so we'll get into a little bit more of that later, but we'll start off the top here with Piastri, Oscar Piastri, who wins. He's able to nurse home his medium tires to the end, extend his championship lead to 16 points. I thought it was a spectacular drive from him today. Really showed a lot of growth, I feel like, from where he started in F1 to putting in a drive like he was able to today. But yeah, I just thought it was a great drive, kind of a championship worthy drive in my opinion, with kind of the mixed conditions and then, being able to beat his teammate, off the line like that with a rolling start. That should usually help the guy out who's starting in first.
Yeah, I think this was a great performance. I think it was really simple but great. I think, you just take the lead on lap one, and then from there, you're able to kind of, I don't want to say coast because it took some good effort to get into the house there with those medium tires, but, just be consistent. That's what Oscar does better than pretty much anybody right now, bar maybe Max. So, yeah, really a phenomenal weekend from Oscar on a weekend where Lando looked like he could have been the dominant car, or at least the favored car out of the McLarens. For Oscar to be able to come back in and steal a victory there after losing out on pole, is really big in this title race.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you mentioned, being able to win from second there when Lando was starting on pole, and I really felt like it was his weekend from the jump. He had the better qualifying performance in the sprint qualifying. Obviously, finished ahead in that race, and then I was surprised to see him actually not on pole for the main Grand Prix there in the end. But yeah, I think for the drive itself, I feel like this is where he's gained a lot from his rookie season, maybe even halfway into last year, where he just wasn't able to really have the right tire management like Lando had or like some of the other guys on the grid. Um, he just kind of would degrade through and run through those tires pretty quickly. Instead, and his rookie year, he wouldn't have been able to do this. Those tires would have been gone probably halfway through, and he would have had to come into the pits. And Lando probably wins this race, but he's gained so much now to where he was able to do the 33 laps, I think it was in the end, on those medium tires. I know a lot of other guys did it too, but he was able to make them last way better than anybody else. So I just thought it was a spectacular drive, and it really showed a lot of growth from where we were to where we are now for Oscar.
Yeah, and that's one of the many marks of maturity for an F1 driver is their ability to hold on to the tires and manage them throughout a long stint. We talk about it all the time with IndyCar, with guys like Scott Dixon being so good at managing their tires. And, what do you get that? You get that from experience and from being in the game a long time and knowing what you're doing. Oscar's still a pretty young guy, but already showing some real maturity out there. And we saw that throughout the grid in this race. We saw some other guys who started at the bottom and made some nice progress. A lot of them were the older guys that have been in this position before, especially at a dangerous track like Spa, where it's a lot of high speed corners, a lot of potential for accidents. These guys knew what they were doing out there, managed to maintain their tire wear, and yeah, Oscar did a great job of that from the front of the field as well.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. To me, what was more impressive was that long stint on the mediums, or if it was the race start from Oscar, where he is able to get past Lando. And this is kind of getting into Lando as well, but um, just how he was able to keep his foot down through a Rouge there, just have all the confidence in the world that that thing was going to stick in the wet, in one of the most dangerous corners in the world in the wet to just try and go all out in, and he does it right away with no laps to test out the conditions really at full race speed. He just goes right through there. Lando seems very tentative through those first few corners, and to me, that's ultimately what won Oscar the race and what won Lando the race. I know there's a lot that happened from there on out, but there's so much, and we've talked about this before in this inner team battle, where having the lead after the first lap really dictates the rest of the race for what you're able to do. You so much more opens up for strategy. You're going to get the first call to do whatever you want with that strategy. So there's just a lot that opens up there. And to me, that's where he won the race. And Lando lost it. And then there's other stuff that we'll get into as well. But I think that's really what it all came down to in the end.
Yeah, and I think for me it was that first lap pass because it's a track specific, but Spa just like I just mentioned those high speed corners, moving through that first lap going through Eau Rouge and Radion. I mean, we can talk later about whether or not they waited too long to start the race, but I was certainly nervous watching the guys go through there the first lap that, somebody would lose it through that part of the track. But, a Piastri and a lot of other guys in the field as well, to give credit, spread it around a little bit, but they, kept their foot on the gas and stuck through that corner, that portion of the track was really sensational. Say I would go the first lap, just the willingness to really put the pedal to the floor there and risk it all so early in the race. A Piastri could have waited behind him if he felt that he had the pace, could have waited behind, waited out, seen how the strategy played out in a wet race like that. But instead, he just went straight for it, and he picked the right time to do it and nailed the move.
Yeah, I think just going through it, talking about it all, I think it was kind of just a masterclass from Piastri, to be honest, on Sunday. Um, Going, taking the lead on the first lap, then what he did with those medium tires as well. There was only one area point of the race where I thought, he might lose it, and that was, kind of midway through that medium stint where it seemed like there was still a little bit of indecision on whether or not he was going to try and open up a gap to pit again, or if he was just going to try and nurse those things to the end. That could have cost him in the end. Luckily, it didn't, because there's many factors, but Norris made a few mistakes. I still don't know if that would have flipped the race, but that's the one area where, and I don't even know if it was an Oscar thing, more of his side of the garage thing, where they were just unsure of what to do strategy wise. That was the only area where it looked like to me it was in doubt. Other than that, with what Piastri did, what he did on the first lap, and then also not making a single mistake, I think, all day, to be honest. Not on that first lap, not on that 30-something lap stint on the mediums where he was trying to nurse him all the way around. He gets one flat spot there, and he might be toast, or he goes off track just a little bit. That might be it for him as well. With it was dry enough to go on slicks, but it still was damp in certain areas of the track that could have ended his day. But no problems for him. He just kind of cruises to the finish there, in true kind of 2025 Piastri winning fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think Piastri did a great job on those medium tires and deserves a lot of credit. But I think that McLaren as a team also deserve a lot of credit for being this car that has done so well all year with tire wear. That we looked at it, even the broadcast team, a lot of us watching looked at it and thought Piastri had no chance to go to the end, or at least no chance to hold Norris off. And next thing you know, he wins rather comfortably. I know it's about 3.5 seconds the margin, but I mean, he was up 8-9 seconds there into the last few laps, and it really, yeah, after that radio call where he sort of sounded defeated, sort of sounded like he was going to get screwed in this scenario. From there on out, it really didn't feel like there was any doubt within a few laps there that he was going to be able to hold off Lando. And um, Lando made a couple mistakes, but he was kind of almost forced into that, forced to make a move because A, the car was so good, and B, what Oscar did. So credit to both Oscar and the team on that for, managing the race well and just building such a great car that has really dominated all year to the rest of the field when it comes to tire wear.
Yeah, and it seemed like this was kind of going to be the strategy from the jump for the McLarens. Whoever was ahead would get the first pit and put on the mediums, and whoever was in second would go to the hards and see if that could win them the race. Kind of an alternate strategy. So I think it would have been if Norris held on to that first lap lead. I think it would have been just kind of positions reversed there. Norris trying to manage the tires to the end, and Oscar try to charge on those hards. So to me, that seems like it was a McLaren decision that they were going to do from the start. I know it. Norris's side came over the radio, and it seemed like it was kind of a last second thing, thinking about putting on those hards. But Oscar said post race that's what he was going to do if he was in the lead after the first lap or so, or if he was in the lead by the time they took the first pit stop. So I think that's kind of what McLaren was going for, and I like that because it opened up opportunities for the two McLarens to battle. I think if Norris or whoever's in second puts on the mediums there, it's just kind of a procession to the finish, and it ultimately was in the end. But it wasn't for lack of trying. McLaren still gave their guys both opportunities to win from first and second.
Yeah, and I think that's even more credit to Oscar's first lap move, like you were talking about, the importance of it. I mean, that won him the race both on track and off track from a strategy perspective. So, yeah, I mean, he really picked the right time to do it, put his chips all in early, and it paid off. So, yeah, another great race there from Piastri, and credit to him for really going all in on that first lap.
Yeah. Now moving to Lando, the other side of the garage, who might not be as happy with the outcome of the race. He loses the lead at the start. Ultimately, I think that's what cost him the race. There were many other mistakes, later on. Obviously, losing lead at the start, we've talked about this, but gets the worst of the two pit stop opportunities. Puts on the hards instead of the mediums, so maybe he has a chance to get him on strategy and get him on tires. But he just made too many mistakes in the end, chasing down Piastri. Like you said, that was kind of the name of the game for Norris, was just to push real hard, and some of those mistakes may have come, in course of doing that. But he just had to not make any mistakes, and kind of counting up the seconds he lost. I think he probably lost 4 or 5 seconds in the end from those 3 major mistakes that he had. I think that's probably ultimately. I don't think that's what cost him the race. I still think that the first lap thing cost him the race. But that cost him, his second chance at winning the race. You take away those, maybe he makes it there in the end, maybe not. You still have to pass Piastri on a track where it's very difficult to pass. I'm not sure he had that much of a pace advantage, so I still don't think he gets him in the end. But it took away any chance that he had to put pressure on Oscar as well and maybe force him into a mistake.
Yeah, it did. It was like I mentioned earlier, credit to Oscar and credit to the team for what they did. I think Lando's kind of put in a tough spot here. Honestly, I mean, he certainly made an effort to get back up there to the front. He didn't just kind of coast on the fact that he had tires that would last longer and count on them making up the deficit. He got aggressive, made an effort to get up there and win this race. Just makes a couple of mistakes, and just kind of ends up in an unfortunate spot here, being on the second best strategy. So, I don't think this was a terrible race or a terrible weekend from Lando. I think, it puts it on pole, and, does not have his best race, but still manages to bring it home second, and kind of, curb that championship lead that Oscar has, at least keep it to a minimum. So, certainly a disappointing weekend from Lando not to win. But I think this is sort of a mix of, he makes a mistake or two and also gets some unluckiness as well. So, not his best weekend, but also not his worst, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I agree. But like you said, um, he kind of put himself in a like he was put in a bad position. I think he put himself in that bad position just with how he handled the first lap. I know you don't want to spin out from the lead. You're the first guy who's going through every set of corners there, so you don't have any benchmark to see what it's going to be like. That's kind of one of the issues of being in the lead when it starts raining or when you start a race in the rain. Um, but I just think that was kind of one that he really needed to turn in his favor just for the championship. If you look at it as a whole, I think Spa is probably not one of his best circuits. Just historically, I feel like he hasn't done super well there. Last year, I think he kind of struggled at the start and wasn't his best race there either. Um, and just it looked like he was kind of flipping that switch with his qualifying on Saturday. He only finished one spot behind Piastri in the sprint, so it felt like that was kind of a net positive of only losing one point there. And then if you go to the qualifying, putting it on pole, I thought, okay, he's really found something here, and this could be a big weekend for him to kind of flip the script. And then the first lap thing happens, and it just kind of takes all that away. Especially when he has the momentum of the last two race weekends going his way, getting the win. If he would have been able to win this one at a track that he doesn't really seem super well at, and then just with where Oscar was at the start of the weekend compared to Lando to how we finished or how we would have finished, I think it would have been a huge momentum swing. And it just feels like every time we have opportunities for these big momentum swings, it seems like Lando's kind of swinging and missing right now instead of hitting one out of the park. Um, I really just think he needs, one of these things to go his way. And I know you could say he won the last two races as well. Those did, go his way, but it just feels like none of those have really been like true momentum swingers. And I think that this one would have been just based on the track that he was at and kind of the deficit to Piastri at the beginning of the weekend. To flip that, I think would have been a real kind of putting everyone, and especially Oscar, in that side of the McLaren garage and things on purpose, or it would have really would have shown that he kind of is flipping that.
Yeah, I mean, to win 3 races in a row would have really put a stamp on the championship fight and say, I'm here, I'm back in control, even if he was technically 2 points down. That would have kind of started to put Piastri on the back foot. Maybe now Oscar gets to right the ship here. Going into Hungary, I think this is going to be a massive race for their title fight. Just with another month or so off coming after this race, we're going to be in a spot here where, if Oscar wins 2 in a row and builds a 20-plus point lead, certainly not a foregone conclusion, but he's well in the driver's seat for the title. But Lando, he gets a chance to rebound this weekend, still come out with 3 out of 4, and maybe at least it really feels like we got a two-way battle here going to the finish line.
But yeah, like you mentioned, I think next week is going to be super important in Hungary. I just think with Oscar, he was able to win there last year. I know everyone said that next week in Hungary is going to be a huge week for Lando because it's one of maybe his best track. But we got to remember Oscar is the defending champion at that circuit, and with how everything went down last year between the McLarens and at that race, I just think that this could be the momentum swing that Lando was looking for this past weekend. If he's able to win here and kind of flip the script. I know it is a big Lando track where he's done very well. But um, I do think it's very important that he wins and narrows this championship down to under 10 points, or maybe even having to lead in the championship going into the summer break if he's able to win, and Oscar kind of has a big day of struggles. So yeah, I think that this is a huge week coming up in Hungary. And one, you got to have some momentum going into the summer break, one way or another. And a win at this next race would be really big for Lando.
Yeah, I certainly think it'd be very poetic if there was some team orders at this race that kind of shifted the momentum of the title fight. But I do have to give McLaren credit that they've done a very good job so far just letting these guys race, and I kind of hope that they keep doing it that way because it's made it a lot more entertaining for us as fans. So yeah, I'm just hoping to see more of that in Hungary next weekend. Let these two guys battle it out, and yeah, kind of see which way the momentum swings going into summer break.
Yeah, I think at this point, if you're McLaren, I would not want any team orders the rest of the year. I don't care if it's how big the championship lead gets for one of their drivers, one way or the other. There's really no point in kind of preserving anything at this point in that aspect because the lead in the constructors championship is so huge. You're not going to lose it. I don't even know. I think you'd probably have to like DNF both cars, pretty consistently all the way out here to lose this constructors championship, and that's just not going to happen. So I don't think there should be any team orders from this point on. I think they should let them race both in strategy from both sides and from the drivers. Just let it go all out to the finish, and I think that will a give the most deserving champion, and B, it will, I know that they don't care about this; they just care about winning. But it'll be the most entertaining for us, for the fans to see these two guys just duke it out from here to the end.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. If my math is correct, McLaren's up 268 points in the constructors, and Ferrari's in second place with 248 points total this year. So, yeah, I mean, I guess nothing's impossible, but that's pretty close to impossible for them to even be under threat this year. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a slam dunk here to just no team orders the rest of the way, ride it out, let these guys do what they got to do. Even if it leads to a little bit of strife, we've got the regulation changes next year. We don't know how that's going to shake out. This might be our one chance of the title. Let these two guys go duke it out, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, I'm right there. I think that would be the best outcome for everyone. Uh, Moving on, another guy who had a great race, like Oscar, Lewis Hamilton, great race, great strategy call from them, from pit lane start, although they ended up starting not from the pit lane because of the whole start procedure with the rain and everything. But nonetheless, started very far back, moved it up all the way to P7. I think he had one lap where he had 3 overtakes when he was going, pushing his way through the midfield. Great strategy to bring him in first before anyone else get the advantage of the slick tires and move him all the way up to P7. I think he could have probably should have still got Albon for P6 there. I think that would have been a pretty maximized day, but nonetheless, I think that moving up that many positions, especially when Hamilton looked pretty far off the weekend to start. I think it was a great race from him. To me, it's between Lewis and Oscar for best drive of the day. I could see the sides for both of those, but yeah, great drive from Lewis nonetheless.
Yeah, I kept waiting for him to pass Alex, but I guess it was clearly very hard to pass out there all day for anyone. We didn't get as many overtakes as you'd normally expect at a track like Spa. So, fair enough there. I think this was really, it seems crazy to say for a Ferrari driver, but this was perfectly executed both on the side of the team and the driver here. Obviously very frustrating weekend for Lewis in qualifying. He comes out before the week and says he's going to win a championship with Ferrari. A failure is not an option, and then immediately struggles in qualifying both for the sprint and for the Grand Prix, and then had an okay sprint race given where he started. Certainly not bad, but it was far off the points there. So yeah, for him to really come out, have just a massive race here. It gets off to a great start on the inters, and then they play the strategy perfectly. They get in there before anyone else really set the tempo and make up a lot of ground on the rest of the field. I think he made up a few spots just from that decision alone. It was brilliant top to bottom, and a great rebound from Lewis, who was really struggling this weekend and has kind of struggled most of the season.
Yeah, I think with how he was driving to start that race, carving his way through the midfield, even if they don't make that strategy call and they go in the next lap, kind of when the majority of the rest of the field went in, I still think that he would, probably have made it into the top 10. Definitely, I think maybe even up to P9, P8, and maybe even P7. I'm not sure. Just he was just very in tune with the car. It felt like at that point. Um, and I think that it was going to be a good day for him regardless. But that pit call certainly helped bringing him in, getting him the peak performance from strategy with being the first guy in and really maximizing that amount of time gained to the rest of the field. Yeah, it was just a really good race from Lewis, and like you said, with how he is viewing everything right now, it seems like one day he's really down and out. This thing's not going to work, and then the next day it's we've made a lot of improvements, and I'm seeing where this is going, and I like where it's going, and I want to be a champion here. It feels like we're kind of really battling those two sides right now, just depending on the outcome of the day. But that's just kind of life as a Ferrari driver, I think, and hopefully that changes because I'd like to see him and Charles fighting for more wins. But right now, that's just kind of the reality of being a Ferrari guy.
Yeah, and I actually thought that the strategy was really bold to bring him in first on the inters, just because he was doing so well out there against everyone else, was really carving up the rest of the field on the inters. But then you go back and look at the times, lap times from before and after the. I mean, it's literally a 10 to 15 second difference between those guys on at what at that point were pretty well worn in inters versus the fresh slicks. So they just absolutely aced it. A credit to him, and yeah, I'm hoping that this can be a little bit of a kickstart for him. A race where you can take something positive away from what was otherwise a really negative weekend, and they've got Hungary as well to hopefully build a little more momentum, and then summer break to kind of recharge and it can't be in the shop, I guess, but figure out some more stuff maybe as time goes on.
Yeah, that's a great point. I had completely forgotten about that. But when they did pull him in, as the first guy in, I was kind of like, what is Ferrari doing? Why again Ferrari? But it actually because like you said, he was carving his way through the field real nice. He looked like maybe the best guy out there. I thought, man, they're kind of messing him up again. This is typical Ferrari, but no, it was actually the right call. So props to Ferrari there for congratulations for making the right strategy call for once. But yeah, I think it was a great call, and it ultimately worked out. So maybe that's why I'm sitting on the couch watching and they're doing their thing. But they're not always right on the strategy calls either on the Ferrari pit wall. So moving to kind of the race start and that procedure, I really there was a big conversation. Should it have been red flag? Should they have tried to dry the track a bit more behind the safety car and get going? To me, at the time, I really wanted them to just kind of do a few more laps and then get going. But with the added rain that came in there, I think we were kind of ultimately heading for um, you know a red flag there in the end, regardless of bringing the guys in. It just got to a point there for a little bit where it was just going to be too much anyways. Now I think they could have gone back out after that second time sooner, where the rain came in. I think that that may have made for some more excitement. Just some more wet racing would have been a little bit better, and probably would have helped this race out given how it turned out um, for the majority of it. But yeah, I think ultimately in the end it was the right call to red flag it and bring the guys in. At the time, I was a bit frustrated, but I think it was the right decision in the.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you here. I do think if you're going to wait for it to dry, then yeah, maybe it would be nice to see a little more effort in just drying the track sooner so everybody's not sitting around waiting uh, for well over an hour there for the restart. But I do think they made the right decision to not go in those super wet conditions because, yeah, like we mentioned earlier, Spa is a very dangerous track. We've seen some
Yeah.
tragic accidents there over the years, and with that spray, they're just low visibility at a track like that. Um, it's really just something you can't have. So I think that they did make the right call. I think really your only two criticisms would be making a greater effort to dry the track and get them out there quicker, and then also doing so many laps under a safety car there at the start, so many race laps. Maybe one or two less would have been nice. I know that that was something that Max Verstappen uh, was kind of complaining about after the race, and he would know better than us on something like that, frankly. But at the end of the day, I think being on the cautious side at a track like Spa is the right decision. Maybe some other tracks you can get away with a little more, but just given the high speed nature and dangers of Spa, this was the right call and by the FIA.
Yeah, I think you're right. What we've seen in the past here is, there's been some really bad accidents, um, and I think I know you're going slower, on a wet track, but to have guys in really bad conditions, with how much spray there is on these cars right now, going through a rouge like that, or going up any of the long straights into the heavy braking zones. I don't see that really ending well. Um, I know these cars are very safe at this point, but it is probably best to just wait it out and make that decision. I wish they would have, they probably could have got going a bit sooner. After that, like we said, just I think the track was dry enough to where um, the spray was pretty reduced, and we could have gotten on with it and maybe gotten two, three, four more laps of wet racing in before they switch over to the dries. But I don't know how much more of a difference that would have made. So in the end, I think it was the right call. It's always frustrating. You always think, man, just put these guys out there, get them racing. You're ready for the race to start. Let's just do it. But sometimes I think the patience is required, um, just for everyone's safety out there, uh, to wait off and kind of sit back and take a wider look at the weather and everything, and make that decision like that. So in the end, right call in my book.
Yep. Yeah, I really don't have much more to add there. I'm in the same boat. Safety first when it comes to Spa. Maybe some like next week at Hungary. A little bit slower track. Maybe it's a different decision, but I think it's Spa. It's the right call 10 times out of 10.
Yeah. Let's move to our personal podiums now. In first position for me is Oscar Piastri. I said earlier, drive of the day was going to go between Oscar and Lewis for me. In the end, I had to go Oscar. I just think, looking back on it, it was just a flawless drive. Like we said, from that first lap all the way through the long stint on those tires, just all of it was pretty exceptional in my book. In second, I have Lewis Hamilton. We already touched on his drive as well, but great drive for him and a good rebound after a tough start to the weekend. In third, I have Alex Albon. There were a few guys you could have gone with here to round out in third position on the podium. In my opinion, I thought it was a tough one to decide, but P6 finished for Williams. After a month or so of just kind of bad races, get back into good points. After that tough stretch was a good sign. Sainz had a good performance in the sprint as well. So yeah, it was a pretty good weekend for Williams, kind of getting back into it. and a great drive for Albon.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. I'm also going with Oscar Piastri first. Uh, really just did everything you wanted. Yeah, he qualifies behind Lando, but makes that pass in lap one and runs a perfect race from there. So I'm going to go with Oscar first, and I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton second as well. I really, this was a phenomenal race from Lewis. I think, if he had qualified maybe like 10th or 11th and then finished on the podium, I'd probably have him number one. Um, but just given how poor his qualifying was in both sessions, I think it's tough to give him the top spot if we're going for the whole weekend here. And then I think Albon's a great shout for third. Just to switch it up a little bit, um, go with somebody else, give him a little more shine. I'm going to go with Liam Lawson here, um, who has really put in a few positive performances recently, kind of turned around his season. I mean, he comes back into that Racing Bulls team after a rough stint at Red Bull, and Isaac Hadjar is just schooling him there for a couple months. I mean, was clearly the better driver every weekend, and now Liam's come in 2 out of the last 3 races, top 8 finishes. Just looked very solid. Never a doubt that he was going to score solid points for the Racing Bulls this weekend. And paired with Hadjar having a nice sprint race, they were able to get a few points this weekend and managed to steal some from some better teams. So, I think Albon's a great call. Don't get me wrong, but just gonna switch it up there a little bit.
No, yeah, I love that Liam pick. I think for a while there, obviously after the Red Bull thing, it didn't look great. And then you head to where he is struggling against Isaac and things started to look really bad. But I always just kind of thought, Liam was just going to figure it out. He said this week he had some comments that he just needed more time at Red Bull and it never really shattered his confidence. That wasn't the issue. He kept that. It just, things there just weren't working out. Just needed more time with the car. And, I think what we've seen since Yuki's gone to Red Bull, he put in a decent performance this weekend. Didn't score any points, but he looked better in that Red Bull did Yuki. I just think looking at it, since Yuki's gone there, that seat's just so hard to perform in right now. Even Yuki, with all of his experience, struggling. We saw Perez obviously, struggle very much in those last 2 seasons with Red Bull. So I don't think we really could have expected, looking back at it, much else from Liam in that seat. To be honest, I know things weren't looking, spectacular at the time, but what did we expect? A guy who had minimal experience in F1 to be put in that seat. I just think it was a bit harsh to boot him as quick as they did. But I also think it might be the best thing for him to get back in the Racing Bulls where he can be a little bit more competitive right now and be more comfortable and score more points and just gain experience before maybe something happens again at the main Red Bull team later on in his career, or he gets a chance somewhere else. I think it was probably the best decision for him in the end. But yeah, or the best outcome for him in the end. But yeah, that race this week was really good. So I like that shout for Lawson to get in there as well.
Yeah, I think realistically, I think it's better for him in his long-term prospects of getting to another team. I think, Red Bull, yeah, they've obviously had the recent change in leadership, which may shake things up there as far as who they pick for second driver, but I can't imagine another chance there's coming anytime soon, with the rest of their roster. So for me, the way I'm looking at it is, hopefully Liam has a good rest of this year, maybe next year, and then starts getting some looks elsewhere. I think that'd be the best thing for his career. And certainly, a few months ago, I thought he was going to be out of F1 at the end of this year, even after a few races in the Racing Bulls with the way he was performing. But now he's back on track, and it looks like the guy we saw the first 2 years that maybe isn't a perfect driver, maybe isn't a finished product, but certainly has that F1 talent, and on his day can be up there with some really good drivers.
Yeah. I'm still bullish on Lawson heading forward. I think he has a lot of talent. I still love his outlook on racing. I know it rubs some people the wrong way, but I think it's a good outlook to have just in terms of self confidence. Um, my stinker of the week, real quick, is it's got to be Lando. I hate to say it, I hate to do it, but it's got to be Lando. Um, I'm sure there were worse drives out there, um, but for the implications of a season of a championship, just losing losing that lead at the start, um, and kind of letting your teammate gain momentum back and gain points back for his championship lead. Kind of just not not as bad, like not a horrific weekend, not a nightmare weekend for Orlando. I think that would have probably been wrecking out of the race or something like that. Um, but still, just not quite what we need. From Lando's perspective to win this championship. So for me, it's got to be Lando. But you can make the case for a few other guys this week as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a different guy, a guy who I really hate to put here. You can tell it's clearly weighing on him. What these last few months have been for him. And don't want to pile on the young guy, but I'm gonna go with Kimi Antonelli here. Our guy's just had a really rough few months. Um, you know, uh, we're looking at 4 retirements here in the last 7 races, plus a 16th and an 18th. Of course, you do throw his first F1 podium right in the middle of that in Canada. So,
Yeah.
it hasn't been all negative, I guess, but, it really sucks to see. I mean, you saw him, you know, uh, pretty much in tears there at one point this weekend, and it's clearly weighing on him a lot. And I'm really rooting for him to turn it around. Just, if it was any other driver, I'd put him in this spot. So, it's just, there's a lot of other guys that could go here too. I mean, Lando, like you mentioned, um, guys like Colapinto is just non-existent at this point. Um, but yeah, I'm just gonna have to go with Kimi Antonelli here in the hopes that a turnaround is coming soon.
Yeah, don't get me started on Alpine. Don't get me going down that rabbit hole with the Franco stuff. But um, I really think Kimmy's gonna. I think he's gonna turn it around. I still have a lot of confidence in him. Like you said, it's been a tough stretch. There's been some things out of his control, some mechanical issues. He's had some mistakes as well. And this weekend, the qualifying, him and Lewis were kind of just way off their teammates with what they were able to do. Um, it's just kind of been a little bit of an odd stretch, but you throw in that podium in there, like you said. You also throw in, a sprint pole in Miami. I just think that there's been some really good moments from Kimmy, and he's a rookie. He's got a lot to learn. We saw from his first kind of FP1 test last year at Monza. Yeah, he makes mistakes. He crashed there, but he's going to make some mistakes. I think he's just pushing the limits and finding what the limits of the car is. Um, and yeah, I still think he's got, I'm not going to give up on the guy yet. I think he has a ton of talent. Um, and I think he has, championship potential one day. We also got to remember he's still he's still in high school at this point, or the equivalent of high school in Italy. So he's still very, very, very young, and it's really early to make kind of big picture, kind of descriptions for or predictions for Antonelli. I don't think that's what you're doing, but I'm just saying, it's very early to make any of those, and I think he'll be fine in the end.
Yeah. I want to be very clear that I'm still all in on Kimmy. I think he's got superstar potential. He was thrown into this situation as 17, 18-year-old coming in here at a top team and being expected to perform with a guy like George Russell. And even at the start of the year when he was off the pace with Russell, but he was still doing very well. He was, in my opinion, one of the best drivers of the year through Miami. It's just been a really rough few month stretch here, and I think he'll get it turned around. If they give him time, they give him a chance. I really don't have any doubts about that. Just a rough weekend for him, and a rough few months in general, really.
Yeah, I think we're both, proud members of the Kimi Antonelli fan club. So, I don't think, either of us are going anywhere in that sense. And like I said, I still think that there's a lot, for him to learn and to go through. And also, you put a guy that young into, I know Mercedes isn't what they were, 4, 5, 6 years ago, but they're still a major team, one of the most prominent teams in F1. So, to put a young guy straight into a position like that, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve for anyone, and I think he's just kind of going through that right now. And by the end of the season, I think he'll kind of come out on the other side. And and yeah, I think you see the flashes, and that's really the key for anyone in their rookie season, especially for a guy that young and at a team like that. So I still think, yeah, we could be seeing more, but I think we're seeing kind of we're still seeing at points what we need to see from Kimmy.
Yep. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Just some normal rookie highs and lows in a lot of ways. Just a bit of a prolonged low here, but I have no doubt he'll come out of it.
Yeah, I agree. A couple quick topics here to finish off. Uh, it's just something I noticed. Leclerc, another podium finish for him. 5 podiums this year for Leclerc. I feel like I wasn't really, expect like that didn't really register with me until they said it at the end of the broadcast there that this was his 5th podium of the year. I don't really remember too many like crazy memorable moments from him, but he's got the same amount of podiums as Verstappen, obviously without the wins that Verstappen's had. Um, but I just feel like these past couple seasons have been kind of some of his best work in F1 right now, or in his career so far, and he's not really got rewarded for it much. You could say he finally won his home race at Monaco, which was very rewarding for him, and he got another Monza win last year, which also very rewarding. But other than that, in terms of big picture, in terms of wins, total amount of wins or fighting for championships or whatever. I just feel like he hasn't really gotten to reap the rewards of his good driving right now. I think he's, uh, really exceeded what that car has been doing this year with 5 podiums. And, you look at Lewis and he's not close to that right now. I'm not saying that Lewis has been, terrible. It's just I think Leclerc has been that good so far this year.
Yeah, and I mean he's got 4 podiums in his last 6 races, so he's really had a nice run here. I'd love to see him in a McLaren level car, see what he could do against the likes of Norris and Piastri. But it's still a very solid run here for Leclerc, and a guy that for all his fame and notoriety, I think he's been a little easy to overlook lately. Just we been focused on this McLaren battle, and and then every now and then, like in the sprint race, Max will pop back up and remind us why he's still one of the best of all time. But Leclerc just comes in, week out for the most part. He's had a rough moment or two. He certainly was had a rough weekend at Silverstone, but for the most part, these last few months, he's been pretty exceptional. So, got to give a lot of credit where credit is due there to Leclerc. And, hopefully we get one more nice little run here from Ferrari before the year ends. Maybe see both those guys on the podium at one of these races one day.
Yeah, a double Ferrari podium with those two would do numbers. But yeah, I think what we've seen has been really spectacular so far. And I'd like to go back and see how many of these races he's finished on my personal podium of these last 4 or 6 where he has podiumed, because I don't know if he would be on many of those, and I think he actually probably deserves a spot on a lot of those, or at least to be mentioned with those guys, just with how he's driven. Um, another story from the race. Poor Nico Hulkenberg, a race removed from his first podium. Um, should have been back in the points this week as well. Sauber making the right strategy call at the beginning of the race, getting him, moving up spots, kind of like Hamilton did. But then Sauber decide for some random reason to hit him and take him off the mediums. When everybody else was kind of nursing those, pretty much everybody else was nursing those, making them able to last to the end. When he was in the top 10 at the time, taking him, kind of completely out of contention for, getting back into points. So, uh, you know, sucks to see, but also, I think Hulkenberg will be okay missing out on a point or two here. Still, very happy after his first podium.
Yeah, he's definitely still riding the high from Silverstone a little bit, I'm sure, but it was definitely it's stunk to see because he did so well. Like I was alluding to earlier, with the a lot of the veterans in the field doing very well on the intermediates, and he looked like he was off to a great start. Started 4 spots behind Gabby, and moved his way well up the field there. But then he ends up 17 seconds behind him by the end of the race, and of course, they let Bortoleto through at one point because Hulkenberg was just, sort of on the wrong strategy there, like you said, going slow. So, yeah, it really stinks for him because there's potential here for double points for Sauber. Gasly really put in a great performance to hold that P10, but he was well behind Bortoleto in ninth. There was potential here for double points, and they just sort of let Hulkenberg down here. But it's still a solid drive from him, and it's still some momentum from Sauber. It doesn't feel that crazy now for them to be scoring points after what we thought of them even at the start of this season. So, yeah, it's just not their day. Didn't quite work out, but still 2 points from the team for Bortoleto.
Yeah, another guy who could have been on the personal podium, Bortoleto, great drive for him as well this week. Lastly, here, kind of a big picture thing, but why is it so hard to overtake at Spa, and why is this track kind of becoming? I don't want to say obsolete because that's too far. Um, it's still an incredible track, and it's not the track's fault. I think it's more to do with the cars than anything else. But it's got two of the longer, kind of slipstream areas on the calendar, uh, and yet no one is able to overtake. It doesn't make any sense to me. You'd think, you know, the areas where you can get the slipstream and cruise up and cruise past the guy in front of you with DRS help, with all of the technological, you know, advancements and advantages you have now. You'd think it'd be this track would be filled with overtakes, and yet we're seeing none. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I hate to see it because, I feel like we're kind of wasting races at Spa that could be, incredible events, and we're just not. We're talking about it being kind of a snoozer of a race, even with there being um, elements involved with there being a switch from wet to dry. Still, we're still kind of talking about it in that same way. I just think it sucks, but
Yeah, it's disappointing because I mean, this is a track that we look forward to all year. I would certainly put it in my top 5 F1 tracks in a vacuum. And we saw this earlier in the year too. Suzuka is one of my favorite tracks, and was a really disappointing race weekend there as well. So I'm hoping for the best for places like Interlagos down the line, which we love. But I think I think it's just a car design issue. There's clearly an issue with these guys not being able to pass close to each other. We had some DRS trains in this race. Um, yeah, I'm. This is just something where I'm hopeful that the next generation of cars here coming in 26 will hopefully resolve some of these issues, because it just doesn't make for great entertainment, really. I know there'll be some purists out there, I'm sure, that what we'll call people casuals for wanting more overtakes. And I'm not saying it's got to be IndyCar or certainly not NASCAR levels of overtakes here, but uh, we'd certainly like to see a little more movement up and down the field that doesn't require weather, because it feels like a lot of these races now we're rooting for weather even more than we used to, or rooting for Pirelli to do something crazy with the tires here to sort of change things up and make things interesting. Because when the top two is pretty locked in most weekends. I shouldn't say most weekends, but McLaren is clearly the best team, and uh, you know, there's not much of a team title fight. You got to have something to shake it up a little bit, and I'd rather that be better car design regulations on behalf of F1 than these wacky tire strategies or wacky weather or anything. Just like to see some pure good racing, and we have seen some of that certainly, but it could be better. Absolutely.
Yeah, you just think the purists would want overtaking as well, and I think that you know there used to be more overtakes. I feel like so that's kind of a purist thing, but yeah, some people will claim that we're just looking for overtakes, or everyone's just DTS fans now, and that's just that's not really the case, but that's a whole separate conversation. But I just it pains me because I know how good tracks like Spa are. I know how good tracks like Suzuka are, like you said, and I just it hurts to see races go by there where we're not seeing as much action, as much excitement as we would like to. It's just you only come to these places once a year, and it just feels like you're wasting a year at a track where you could be having an incredible race, one that will go down in the history books, and you just don't get it. So it to me, it's one of those things that actually really it is hurts to watch, because you know the potential there. It's not one of these tracks where it's always been it's always been hard to overtake. It's always been part of the challenge. It's not that. It's you know what that, and that's not the track's fault. So we have to hope for. Uh, I don't think that the new regulations will probably change that much, which also stinks. But all we can do is hope at this point that'll turn things around.
Yeah, I think the good news is that we've got one pure racing track left on the calendar that has not let us down. Very much looking forward to. I think that hopefully we've got some more opportunities coming up left here on the calendar. But it's disappointing to have this release. But just it feels like a lot of the season has passed us by, and there's been some missed opportunities here. So we got I think 11 races left to figure this out, and I'm hoping that we can find a.
Yeah, the pure racing circuit left. I think you're talking about is Las Vegas, right? I mean, that's obviously the purest of the pure that we have left. No, I know it's Interlagos, but we're and I actually like Las Vegas, so that's probably not very fair. Um, but yeah, I just I hope Interlagos doesn't suffer the same fate that some of these others are. Right now, it's still producing good races. It's produced probably the best few the last few years. Um, so yeah, we still have that to look forward to. But just big picture, I just hope that we can get more good races at these tracks. I know every year is not going to be a great race at every track, but it just feels like it's kind of becoming more common that we're seeing this, and yeah, that's part of the problem um, moving forward. But yeah, I think that's everything we have for this week. We'll be back next week to break down everything from Hungary, from Budapest. It should be, hopefully a good race there. One Oscar, like we said, won there last year, one of Lando's better tracks. So should be, a very competitive race up near the front. Maybe some of the other guys will mix it up there as well. But super excited for that. So we'll be back next week to break down everything that happens in Hungary.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a European race, so I'm excited for that. Excited to see some more McLaren drama potentially here. Hopefully, just leaving it on track time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, we'll be back next week. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. See you soon.